What is done when a store manager calls security on the actual owner? One man was embarrassed in front of his employees, but the manner in which he did, it reversed the power dynamic and revealed much more than a mere mistake. Terrence Dillard wasn't dressed to impress. Gray hoodie, faded jeans, beat-up sneakers he fit in, and that was the idea when he visited Valera Studio, the boutique he co-owned in downtown San Jose. He wasn't around to be spotted. He was there to verify inventory and check a few shipments. Nothing out of the norm, he'd done it this way for years. Keep low, keep the attention on the product, not the proprietor. It was Tuesday afternoon early. The store had only a few browsers, young professionals browsing around handbags and coats. Terrence was standing by the stockroom door with his tablet cross, referencing SKUs to what was on the shelf. He didn't notice the man watching him from the register. "Excuse me." The voice cut through. The soft instrumental playing overhead. Terrence looked up. "I'm going to need you to leave," the man said firmly. Terrence blinked. "Sorry you don't work here, you're making the customers uncomfortable." It took Terrence a second to process. The man was approximately 40, white, clean-shaven, wearing a neatly pressed dress shirt with a name badge. Colin Prescott, regional manager. That was new. "I'm one of the owners," Terrence said quietly, "just doing some checks." Colin's face set in a harder line. "Right? Look, you can't just say that. I don't know you and I don't like being lied to. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." Terrence scowled. "I'm not lying. My name is Terrence Dillard. I co-founded this store with Sean Kittrell, been involved since day one." Colin shook his head. "I was employed recently to tidy up operations around the district. I don't have patience with loitering or employees bringing in buddies to play around in back." Now people were beginning to look. A woman who was grasping a leather clutch stopped halfway. A college student, close to the sunglasses stand, leaned his head toward the disturbance. Terrence remained calm. "Why don't you call Sean or try the owner registry?" "I don't have to call anybody," Colin snapped. "You can either walk out now or I'll call security." Terrence sighed. He could feel the heat rising in his face, but held it. "This is a mistake. You're making a real mistake." Colin didn't flinch. Security's on the way. 2 minutes later, a cop from the mall, stepped in. Already briefed. "Sir, we need to ask you to leave." Terrence's voice dropped low. "I built this business. I put in the money, the vision, the sweat, and you're kicking me out of my own store, sir. Please don't make this hard." Terrence looked around. Customers were staring, whispering. The cashier, a young black woman named Deja, appeared to want to speak up but didn't. Colin stood rigid, jaw-clenched, eyes cold, so Terrence walked out. Not because he agreed, not because he was scared, but because he knew anger wouldn't do anything right then as he stepped into the California sun. His heart pounded like a warning drum. He did not utter a word. He did not glance back, but the camera within the store had recorded everything. But what Colin did not know that day was who he had just dismissed prior to the storefronts and shiny wood floors, prior to the glass shelving and specialty lighting. There was only a little dream on a creased piece of paper Terrence Dillard had written it while waiting in the back room of a warehouse position in Modesto, California. He was 25, exhausted, neglected, and determined. He didn't have money growing up. His mom worked nights at a convalescent home, and his dad cobbling together side gigs to pay the bills. Terrence never anticipated handouts, but he paid attention to details, to presentation, to the feeling people had when they walked into a room that made them feel seen. After years of saving and working 2 jobs, he partnered with Sean Kittrell, an old college buddy with a retail analytics background. The concept was simple: open a boutique that sold timeless minimalist fashion for working professionals who didn't feel represented by mainstream luxury brands. No loud logos, no gatekeeping attitude, just quality and respect. Terrence didn't want to be the face of the company. He never enjoyed cameras or public speaking. He left that to Sean, who loved panels and photo ops. Terrence was the one in the background, ironing out supply chain issues and assisting Pick, the ideal lighting for the fitting room's quiet, focused, intentional. They opened their first Villari studio location in San Jose in 2019, a risk, but by the end of year 2, they'd made a profit, not explosive growth, but steady, smart expansion. They opened a second store in Pasadena and then a third in Sacramento. Terrence was the silent partner, throughout all three opting to observe and guide from behind the curtain. The employees recognized him by face, some by name, but corporate turnover particularly. Among upper management did not mean everybody knew who he actually was. He did not care that until it became an issue the day Colin Prescott had him ousted, Terrence slept little that night. Not from anger, from something deeper disappointment, not only in Colin, but in how easy it had been for his presence to be erased, dismissed, and questioned in seconds. Terrence replayed. The moment in his head, Colin's conviction, his voice, the total absence of curiosity. He remembered his mother, what she used to say when someone makes up who you are before you can speak. They're not hearing your voice, they're seeing a tale they fabricated around you. He remembered Deja, the cashier, who had seemed to want to jump in but couldn't. How many times had she been on the receiving end of someone like Colin Terrence? Sat on the edge of his bed that night and made a decision he wasn't going to storm and yell or demand heads to roll, but he also wasn't going to let it slide, because this wasn't just about him. It was about what was tolerated and what needed to change. The next morning, he called Sean. "You're not going to believe what happened yesterday," Terrence said. Telling me every detail, there was a heavy silence on the other end. "Wait, Colin kicked you out," Sean said at last. "He did not recognize you." "Nope. And security escorted you out of our store like I was a damn thief." Sean breathed. "What do you want to do?" "I want the entire staff there, him included. I am not going in alone." Sean did not disagree. He knew Terrence's tone, calm but final. Later that morning, Terrence called a lawyer they'd used previously, someone keen but level-headed, not for a lawsuit but for clarity. Then he called Deja quietly, inquiring if she'd be willing to speak out at the meeting. She didn't hesitate by noon. The plan was set. The man who had been muzzled in his own company was about to speak on his terms. So the following morning, Terrence returned, but not the same. Man from the previous day, Terrence did not walk into Valaire's studio that morning, with his shoulders puffed or his ego taking the lead. He did not need to. His presence spoke volumes. He dressed exactly the same gray hoodie, but this time it was deliberate, same jeans, same battered sneakers. The only difference was the crowd. Who followed him in on his left was Sean Kittrell, co-founder and co-owner, dressed in a navy blazer and clutching a clipboard. On his right, Alicia Bria, their attorney Crisp, and collected two more recognizable faces trailed Carlos, the store's longest-tenured stock supervisor, and Deja, who'd worked the register during yesterday's encounter. The store wasn't yet open, but the crew was already there. Getting ready for the day, Colin stood behind the counter speaking to a sales associate as the group entered. He spun, puzzled. "Can I assist?" He froze. Halfway through his sentence when he saw Terrence look at him. Terrence did not bat an eye. "We need to collect the employees." Sean ordered full team meeting immediately. Colin hesitated. "I was not told. You're being told now." Alicia, speaking firmly, her tone acutely enough to slice through excuses. "It is imperative and time-sensitive. 10 minutes and every person was in the back office. 15 individuals ranging from part-timers to department leads lined. The small room folding chairs had been drawn in. Colin stood beside, the wall arms crossed, tight smile. Terrence stood before them, no podium, no notes, just presence, some of, me. He started some, My name is Terrence Dillard. I co-founded Valaire Studio with Sean 6 years ago. I've worked every aspect of this business, stockroom, customer service, marketing, sourcing. I've been here since this place was just a logo drawn on a napkin. Quiet. Yesterday, I walked into this store to make inventory counts. I dressed the way I normally dress because that's how I am. and I was challenged, disrespected, and expelled. He stopped. His eyes darted. The room he saw, discomfort, guilt, interest. Some folks didn't have a clue where this was headed. Colin's face was strained, like he was still, waiting to be vindicated. I wasn't questioned. Who I wasn't addressed with interest, or even the most basic decency. I had been treated like a stranger, a nuisance to be eliminated in my own company. There was a shuffle in the room. Someone breathed in. Another leaned in and spoke to their neighbor. Terrence turned around Sean, who nodded and clicked his phone. Seconds later, the office television flickered into life. Security footage from the day before flashed onto the screen. The whole confrontation unfolded angle by angle. There was no voice, but body language said. The whole story, Colin's stance, Terrence's calmness, the entry of mall's security, the manner customers watched, the manner Deja lingered when it stopped. No one spoke anything. Then Deja stood up. I needed to speak. Yesterday, she spoke softly, but I feared losing my job. I saw everything. I knew who Mr. Dillard was. I did not know what to do. Terrence nodded at her. Thank you for saying that. He turned to the group. This isn't just about me. This is on how simple it is for a person to glance at another individual and make a choice about who they are, and then behave as if that choice is reality. Colin finally spoke. I didn't know. That's the issue. Terrence interrupted. You didn't ask. You didn't think. You assumed. You acted, and now we're all standing in the aftermath. The silence was thicker now. Not angry, reflective. This is not a trial. Alicia said, no one's here to shame anyone, but this company operates on more than product. It operates on people and trust, and if we don't discuss what just occurred, we don't progress. Colin gazed down for the first time, but the meeting did not go the way Colin believed it would not. Even remotely, no one shifted. The back office of Valeri Studio had never been so quiet. No racks clicking, no sales floor chatter, just 15 individuals sitting in chairs that suddenly felt too rigid. Colin remained upright, hush now, arms to his sides, smugness gone. Terrence stood back and moved for Alicia to take the lead. We're not here to do damage control, she said, her voice. Even this isn't a matter of PR or face saving. This is about awareness of what happened and learning what type of culture you all wish to be part of. She half-turned, looking at Colin. When someone enters a place they help to create and is treated like an outsider, that is not just an error, that is a message, whether or not you intended. Colin opened his mouth, hesitated. I know how it appeared, but I really believed. No, Terrence said. His voice was low, but everybody heard it. You didn't think that is the problem? The words hung in the air. Then Carlos spoke up from the back. Can I say something? Terrence nodded. I've been here since day one. Carlos said, I remember when we had folding tables for exhibits. I remember when Terrence used to take us lunch on shipping days. Days you spoke to him like a thief. Man, and I get it. Perhaps you didn't know him, but your tone, that wasn't security protocol. That was control. Some heads nodded slowly. I've seen how you speak to staff. Carlos went on. You deal with like we're beneath you, like it's your role to keep us in order. Colin shifted uncomfortably. I have a job to do. He started. Deja cut in. So do we. But doing your job isn't about looking down on people. The room began to breathe once more. People found their voices. Talia. A merchandiser leaned forward. I thought it was just me. You walk past and don't say hello. You act like we're lucky to be here. Sean stepped forward. This business was built on respect. We don't carry luxury fashion to impress people. We carry it to give people something that feels worth their time, that involves our team. Colin appeared dazed, his face reddening, his eyes darting from speaker to speaker. I was brought in to impose order. I didn't know. I never meant. But that is the point. Terrence said, intent doesn't wash out. Impact. Colin swallowed hard. I don't despise you, Terrence said. I don't even want revenge, but I am not going to act as if this did not occur, because every individual in this room witnessed it or felt it. He stopped allowing the words to settle if you can't lead. Humbly, you shouldn't be leading. No one applauded. No one cheered. This wasn't a film. It was real, and everyone felt it. Terrence turned to the staff. I know what it's like to feel invisible, to have someone shrink you. Without saying your name, that's not how we do things here. Not while I'm around. A long silence ensued. No, nobody was brave enough to look at their phone. It wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a moment that people would never forget. Finally, Alicia glanced over at Colin. You'll get a turn to talk again soon, but for now, we're requesting that the team briefly step away. Return in 20 minutes. We will be making a decision regarding the next course of action. People stood in silence, not knowing what to say. Most nodded in recognition to Terrence. A couple of them looked him in the eye for the first time all week. When the room emptied, Colin remained behind. He looked up. I didn't know you were the owner. If I had, I wouldn't have Terrence cut him off. But that's the problem. Colin respect doesn't have to have a title anyway. It wasn't about embarrassing Colin. It was about something more. By the time the team streamed back into the room, the mood had changed. Some were quieter, others more reflective, but one thing was clear. People were hearing in a way they hadn't before. Terrence stood at the front, arms crossed, not out of anger, but clarity. His silence was more powerful than anything Colin had spoken since the start of the meeting. Colin stood over to the side, no longer attempting to center himself. He seemed smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, like the burden of what had just occurred was finally beginning to sink in. Alicia cleared her throat. We're not here only to judge. One moment. She said we're here to discuss how that moment says something deeper. This isn't about throwing stones, it's about being honest. So if anyone has anything to say, say it now. There was hesitation. Then Talia spoke again. I think part of the issue is we all just learned to work around it. She said, we justified how we were treated. We assumed that's the way upper management is, but it wears on you feigning like it doesn't affect you. Carlos nodded. That's true. Some of us don't complain because we believe it'll take us hours or opportunities to advance. I've worked retail 6 years, said Marlon, a floor attendant. I've been trailed in stores where I shop. I've been interrogated in places where I work. You begin to think it's just the way things are, but it shouldn't be normal to feel like you're not welcome when you clock in. Colin opened his mouth again, then stopped. He glared at Terrence. I know there's nothing I can say that mends what happened yesterday, but listening to all of this, maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. Maybe I came in here assuming I knew what this place needed, without consulting the people who've been here. The longest, Terrence finally spoke. You didn't ask, but now you have a choice. Colin blinked. What do you mean? Sean stepped forward. You can resign. We won't stop you, or you can stay and undergo a complete accountability review that involves employee interviews, shadowing various positions, required bias training, and straight-up mentorship from us. No title, no corner office, just you learning the culture you attempted to command. Without comprehension, Colin appeared bewildered. You're offering me opportunity. I'm offering you responsibility. Terrence said, you desired to lead. Then begin with listening. There was something regarding the manner in which he said it straightforward without ego that struck more than any scolding possibly could I desire to learn. Colin said. After a moment, I don't want this to define me. Terrence stared him in the face, then let it refine you. The room fell silent again, but this time the energy had shifted toward something else, not pity, not punishment, just change. Talia held up her hand. If he's staying, I want to be one of the people he shadows. I want him to see what a full day on the floor really looks like. Deja smiled. He can walk behind me too. I'll even demonstrate to him how to deal with obnoxious customers. Without calling security, some people laughed. Even Colin smiled, but no one was laughing. At the moment, they were letting go of something heavy. Terrence stepped back again. You all deserve to work in a place where you feel respected, and that begins today. Not just because of what went down, but because you spoke up. That counts. Sean added this: company will not grow if the individuals within it feel small. Remember that. Colin sat down for the first time that morning. He looked like someone who would take notes, but before, it could be said Terrence had one decision left to make. Terrence stood at the back of the office now, allowing the conversation to settle. People had voiced themselves. Colin had listened, genuinely listened for. The first time since setting foot in the store, but there was one thing that remained to be discussed, and Terrence knew he couldn't walk away without saying it. He glanced about the room, then back at Colin. You said you want to learn. That matters, he said, his tone measured, but learning doesn't come without consequences, and sometimes it doesn't come without discomfort. Colin didn't dispute. He sat upright, hands on his knees, eyes steady but unsure. This isn't about saving your job. Terrence went on. This is concerning making you productive to an area you assumed you already knew. Colin nodded once, calmly. You'll no longer be regional manager. Sean interjected, cutting through. The air like a sharp blade, immediately effective. Your position is held in abeyance. Colin winced, but didn't resist. Instead, Terrence spoke. You'll work in this store 3 days per week under supervision. You'll report to Carlos and Dea. No corner office, no team under you, no decisions made. Without checking in first, Colin seemed taken aback but didn't complain. You'll learn. The layout, the language, the pace. You'll answer. Customer calls, process, returns, clean. The fitting rooms. Not because we're attempting to be cruel to you, Terrence held back, but because this is how one builds culture from scratch. You can't lead a team until you've walked in their shoes. Colin exhaled. I'll do it. I mean that. Terrence sat him down. We'll see. Then he turned back to the team. You all deserved better than what went down. Not yesterday, but earlier too. I know some of you have been keeping things inside, waiting for someone else to make the first move that stops here from now on. If something doesn't sit right, say, we're listening. And if you're not being heard, keep talking until someone does. Marlon nodded in agreement. Deja was smiling, the kind that says, at last, Alicia, who had been standing silently in the corner, closed her file but said not a word. She was aware that her job here was just starting. Carlos folded his arms and glared at Colin. You ready to begin anew? I am Colin said. Well, Carlos responded. Then you're with me working on Friday morning shift. Wear sneakers. Laughter broke the strain like a crack in thick concrete, just enough to make people feel the weight go away. Terrence smiled, but it was not a victory smile. It was something more earthy, a sign that this wasn't the end of anything. It was the start of doing things better. One of the part-time associates, Nina, talked for. The first time today, I feel like this is the first real meeting we've ever had, she said. I mean, people actually spoke what they were thinking. That's the idea, Sean replied. Not just today, always. The room started to clear bit by bit. People wandered toward the break room, some remaining behind to speak, one-on-one, with Terrence or Sean. No one scurried out, no one glanced over their shoulder. Colin stayed in the room a little longer before departing. He went up to Terrence. One final time. Thank you for not firing me, he said. Terrence gazed at him and responded, without hesitation. Thank me when you've earned the position you thought you had. Colin nodded slowly and exited. Outside, the store's automatic doors opened and closed as customers trickled in. Just another day to the outside world, but for everyone within Valera Studio, something had changed for the better. But it was never actually about punishment. It was about establishing a new standard. 3 weeks later, a woman walked into Valerie's studio and stopped in front of the display window. She wasn't there for anything in particular, just browsing. but what she saw caught her off guard. A man in a tucked-in black apron was folding denim near the door, scanning labels with care and attention. He said hello to her in a soft, respectful morning, then went back to his work a few feet off a young woman. Deja walked over to assist. Another shopper try on a pair of boots, laughing at something they'd said. Everything seemed ordinary smooth. But if you'd been there that day, if you'd witnessed the meeting, the tension, the cracks forming and healing in real time, it wouldn't have felt ordinary at all. Colin Prescott no longer was the regional manager, but he arrived on time for each shift, stocked shelves, cleaned back counters, dealt with difficult customers, sat in meetings, listened. Not that he was trying to prove anything, but because gradually he was beginning to learn what it was to be a part of something rather than trying to control. It and the staff noticed. Marlon said during a break that Colin had assisted him. Carry in a late delivery, without being asked. Carlos said he'd quit issuing orders and begun asking questions instead. Even Nina, who hardly spoke, informed Sean that it was the first time she felt like her boss. Actually saw her. As for Terrence, he didn't change his attire, still wore hoodies, still walked in quietly, still kept his tablet near, checking on inventory operations, personnel. But one thing did change. He no longer lingered. Behind the scenes. One Saturday afternoon, a high school student interviewing for a part-time position looked up from his clipboard and asked, "Are you the manager?" Terrence laughed, something like that. The viral video, because yes, someone had filmed the original altercation on their phone, went viral at first. It angered people, then questioned, then debated. Local business blogs picked it up. Some viewers criticized Colin severely, but Terrence's decision not to fire him made people think. There was a comment under one of the posts that really caught my eye. It read, "This man had every right to drag that guy through the mud instead. He decided to teach. That's real power." It was reposted hundreds of times, but Terrence didn't care much about the limelight. What concerned him was what was going on inside those four walls, where Deja was now training 2 new employees, where Colin still punched in with clipboard in hand, and where individuals no longer whispered when something did not feel right. They simply said it. The culture had changed, not with slogans or policies, but with truth spoken out loud in the open. One day, Terrence sat across from Sean during a brief coffee break. "You think we did the right thing?" Sean asked, stirring his espresso. Terrence leaned back in his chair. "I don't know if it was right for everyone, but it was right for us." Sean nodded. "Feels different in there now." "That's because it is." Before he left, Sean added, "You ever think about speaking at one of those retail leadership summits?" Terrence grinned. "Nah, I'd rather be in the back checking stock," and he meant it. This story wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't about a dramatic takedown or revenge. It was about accountability, about what happens when you stop letting silence speak for you, about showing people that leadership is measured not by your position, but with your reaction. When the spotlight shines on your worst moment, Terrence didn't need to yell. He didn't need to fire anyone on the spot. He simply stood in the truth and made everyone else do the same. If this story touched you, share. It lets someone else see what real accountability can look like. And if you think that stories have the power to make us think,